Peter says we are called to behave that kind of way. Because when you and I do that, it opens doors for people to walk through to follow Jesus. Here's the biggest problem that most of us have when it comes to telling somebody else about Jesus in our life. And that is we got the wrong goal and we got the wrong method. So let's break these down. We're going to talk about wrong goal first. Have you ever been to a kid's soccer game? I mean like young kids, okay? Where it's just this cluster of humanity running around with the ball, and then somebody breaks out of it and, kicks it at any goal imaginable, even if it's not their field, all right? It doesn't matter. They just kick it at the wrong goal. Or maybe you've gone bowling and then played golf and you forgot which one needs the high score, which one needs the low score, right? And you had the goal. Maybe you feel like you can win an NFL game by just like kicking 3 field goals, and you feel like I'm sorry. Is that meddling? That was personal. I apologize. Okay. Good news, Cowboys fans. You're not going to lose today. It's a bye. Okay? So it's great. And you guys you're favored by 3 today, so that's good. Anyway, I'm teasing my Chiefs. We're probably going to lose today. We're due. But anyway, but I'm praying against it. All of us have had those moments, right? All of us have had those moments where we have focused on the wrong goal. And that's what a lot of us do when it comes to this idea of following Jesus. And so you have to think about the things that most of us think are important. For instance, for some of us, we want to tell, or we've been told that Jesus is for everyone, but for some reason, we just get obsessed with what we're against. Have you noticed that? It shows up on our social media feeds. For many of us, we've understood that all the things that Jesus has done for us, but when we talk about him, all we want to focus on is what God will do to someone else. Maybe for some of us, we have been overcome by the love of Jesus, but yet all we want to focus on is defending Jesus, as if he can't take care of himself, right? For some of us, we've heard we should share who Jesus is, but for many of us, we settle for just knowing who Jesus is and let the world fend for themselves. And for some of us, this is what gets a lot of us, is we get the assumption that in order to be able to talk about Jesus, we have to be perfect first. And we have to act like we're perfect. But the reality is, the more open we are about our faults and failures, the more the world leans in rather than runs away. So Peter is going to get to this in this passage we're going to read today. Let's take a look at this from 1 Peter chapter 2. We're going to start at verse 9. He says, but you're not like that, all the stuff we talked about before, for you are a chosen people. You're royal priests, a holy nation, God's very own possession. And as a result, you can show others the goodness of God, for he called you out of the darkness into his wonderful light. This is an incredible message. You have been called to follow Jesus. Now, some of you might be thinking, yeah, that is not me. You don't know what I've done. Do you think you can out-sin God? Do you think your ability to sin is greater than his ability to save? Yeah, that does mean you. It is for everybody. This is an all skate. You've been called, you've been chosen to follow after him. When I was a kid, I would go out and ride my bike until the streetlights came on. My buddy named Brian lived at the end of the street. He would come out and ride his bike with me as well, but he didn't come in when the streetlights came on. He came in earlier than that, and here's how he knew how to come in. His mom would step out on the front porch and begin to whistle. I've never heard someone whistle this loud. It was incredible the way she could whistle. I'd whistle for you now, but it would pale in comparison to what she did. She had serious pucker power, as they say. And she would whistle, and he would immediately, it's like a dog whistle. He knew, and he'd start racing back to get home because it's time to come home for supper, right? Now, I always said to him, why does your mom whistle and not just yell your name? Well, she didn't want to be yelling through the neighborhood, so she just whistles. I mean, it's weird, but anyway, she whistled. He went in. I didn't, until one day, he invited me to come home to dinner with him. And then when she whistled, that meant it was for all of us. In other words, we were all called in to eat. Here's what God has done. Up until Jesus, the only people that were called were people of Israel. But after Jesus, the call is for all of us to come home to eat. We now all get to be a part of this. And Peter says, you have all been called to be a part of this. You are God's great possession. You are a royal priesthood, a holy nation. And it's not just to enjoy, it is to share with others. Look what he says next. It is God's will that your honorable lives should silence those ignorant people. Now, this is where many of you just leaned in and said, here we go. Let's talk about the ignorant people. I got a list myself. We've all got them, right? But here's what they're talking about. You see, they lived at a time where people accused the Christians of incest. You know why? Because they called each other brother and sisters. They accused the Christians of being cannibals because they talked about in the Lord's Supper eating and drinking the body and the blood of Jesus. And he says, listen, you don't have to debate them. You don't have to prove anything to them. You just live in such a way that they go, you know what? I don't understand them, but I do like them. You see, this is kind of what you and I are dealing with. Many of people in our life right now are calling us, because of our values and because of our virtues and because of our beliefs, they're calling us intolerant and judgmental and mean-spirited. And friends, if that is true, that we're being mean-spirited, we got to change that. But if they're just calling us judgmental because we choose a different way of life, God says, listen, just live in such a way that they look at you and say, I don't know if I believe what they believe, but I like the way they behave. I don't know if I would go to their church, but I would certainly want my daughter to date one of them. Because I know they value people, they love people, and I may not always believe everything they believe, but I do like the way they behave. Peter says we are called to behave that kind of way. Because when you and I do that, it opens doors for people to walk through to follow Jesus.